omnichannel, how to win in the omnichannel environment as if today. What is Woolman? Woolman is Europe's largest Shopify Plus partner and D2C agency. We have currently helped more than 350 brands. We have over 100 employees, and we are a true one-stop shop. So we can serve brands need in whatever position you are. We also have some retail chains as our customers. Currently, we operate in 5 different countries, and we do serve our customers globally. First, I would like to introduce our speakers to you. We have a very special guest here today, Arhi Kivilahti. Please, could you kindly introduce yourself, and then Pinja Kuitunen from Woolman as well. Arhi, please, who are you?
Hi. So my background is in academia, originally in Aalto University here in Finland, studying different retail concepts, how they have emerged, and then spent a year in 2010 in Oxford, where they had a concept of online grocery back in the day. And during that time, I started focusing more on online channel and online grocery retailing. Did my PhD on how the online grocery evolved in UK over the years to become one significant channel. Since then, I spent a couple of years in consultancy before joining Kesko, the second biggest grocer here in Finland, to build their online capabilities in terms of building the online store, and on the other hand, the kind of store processes. And since then, I've tried my hand on starting our own online grocery business, and well, learning a lot, but that's basically it. And since for the last 3 years, I've been independent retail analyst, following different retail markets, working especially with companies in some way or form related to online channel. So trying to follow what happens in the world and how that influences companies.
Great. Thanks, Arhi. Super good to have you here. Today, we will talk about omnichannel as a concept, and then we will point out 5 ways to create a winning omnichannel experience. So if you are in retail, if you are running, as example, with Shopify POS, what should you be aware of? And then finally, we'll add on top Arhi's analysis, how do you see the situation? During this whole presentation, you are free to ask questions. There's the chat window on your right, so please send questions. And together with Pinja, we'll then go through all of the questions by the end of this session. And next step, Pinja, please introduce yourself. Who are you?
Yeah, thank you. And hi, everyone. So in a nutshell, last 5 years, I've been working with brands who uses Shopify ecosystem. And especially I've been following trends and new tools and how to create the best experience and how to increase sales. Before I started at Woolman, I did actually my master thesis about the role of online chat as a part of omnichannel experience. So yeah, this topic is interesting. And how about you, Mikko?
Thanks, Pinja. My name is Mikko Rekola. I'm a chief evangelist here at Woolman. I've helped over 200 brands during past 5 years. I have a strong merchant background in the past myself. People typically know me from Finnish Daily Box and similar cases. And now I've been helping some of our enterprise level customers to grow and also making sure that people understand the capabilities of Shopify Plus and related services. And we are here to have a really good discussion on the omnichannel topic. So let's go towards it. We would like to point out customer service as a topic number 1 and the importance of being proactive in customer service. First, Arhi, what's your thought on the customer service topic when it comes to D2C brands operating, and what's your view on the customer service as a whole? How important is it? Where should people sort of like put some effort?
Well, first, kind of couple of perspectives. Firstly, of course, customer service is taking care of all customers' kind of needs and questions and problems. But on the other hand, I think I like quite a lot of the approach that Jeff Bezos has been emphasizing over the years at Amazon, that customer service, as important as it is, they have the whole S group, the top leadership team has to work for a week every year, has to be able to work for a week at the customer service, responding to customers' queries. But on the other hand, at the same time, he sees customer service as kind of an indication that something has gone wrong. So every time a customer calls, there is something that should have been able to be explained in the website or some other way to be resolved before, so the customers wouldn't need to contact the customer service. So that's of course somewhat not necessarily radical, but at least on the other side of the spectrum to Zappos, which is of course part of the Amazon also, where they on the other hand emphasize, you know, talking to customers as much as possible, as long as possible, which is, well, it's service at least. But that is, in both approaches, it's a good source of understanding what kind of considerations our customers have, what kind of problems, worries they have. It's in one way a quantitative data source on, you know, this many customers contact us on when we are open or any other. So maybe we should somehow point out that more clearly. But it's also a very much qualitative customer feedback or an understanding about customers' problems. And that is something that is very, of course, in the store-based business, the entrepreneurs, the retailers can discuss with the customer. So that's kind of something that doesn't kind of happens obviously at the every day, but for online it's a bit different setting. So I think that's, and on the last point maybe is the kind of peak end rule, which is very famous in customer behavior research, where we kind of tend to think that customer experience is this uniform average kind of all phases of the customer journey. But in fact, research seems to point out that we remember certain highlight moments, you know, whether it's the order being done or any other aspects, and then especially the last part of the customer experience. Whatever happens in the last phase, that's something customers tend to remember. For example, in online grocery, very few players really, besides maybe Oda, really understand how important the delivery driver in fact is. If he or she is, you know, not dressed properly, doesn't behave properly, it really gives a very bad impression of the entire customer experience, the entire retailer. So maybe that's at least some thoughts on the topic.
Really lovely points. Thanks, Arhi. So pointing out what really matters and the importance of customer service. What about you, Pinjo? I know this is one of your favorite topics and you have been following this with our customers and pointing out why is this important and how does this work in Shopify ecosystem? How should you evolve your customer service to the next level?
Yeah, so I would split this into kind of three phases. Like we have the time before the purchase, like we have the pre-conversion phase, and then we have the conversion phase, and then we have a post-purchase phase. So when we go into the Shopify ecosystem, and if you are using like Shopify POS, or if you are doing social commerce on social channels like on Instagram, we have already many tools. The most popular at the moment, the combination is like the Shopify, you have the data there, then you have Georgia's, for example, and then you have Klaviyo, the email platform. And also you can have like new tools like Pump User, video online shopping tool, and for example, this kind of connections, like how you can move the data parameters from Georgia's to Klaviyo and then segment your customers. All this is here, but I've seen that many brands maybe do not spend enough time around this and around these tools. So that's in a nutshell. And when we look at customer service, and when I did actually my master thesis, I found that still, like these different channels, like live chat or phone or voice search or like physical meeting or contact point, we call about the touch points. The top management requires, or they compare those channels equally. And that's kind of the core problem. They shouldn't be measured equally because they have like different ways. And you can, for example, in chat, you can serve 2 customers at the same time and so on. So these 2 points, the measurements, the KPIs, and how you can collect data from different sources together.
Thank you, Pinja. And I would add on top like 2 very important things. Number one that I see a lot is that you are trying to force it as a brand. You choose that you are offering customer service in a single channel, or you're offering customer service at certain office hours. And I would like to sort of like shake that trend a bit, that you would actually understand where your customers are at, and you need to serve them in that channel, whether they are in Facebook or somewhere else. You need to make sure that you are there and you are able to communicate with them and you're open with that. So I would sort of like challenge that in many of our customer cases, that you can't like decide customer service has decided you, and you need to be where your customers are at. And that on top of a free tip is that quite many of our customers are using like services such as mention.com and others, where you can also follow what people are writing about you, where you have been mentioned. If there are discussions about your brand or your services on certain forum, that you can then follow that discussion. I think that's also a vital part of customer service, that you typically look at it as a very, very narrow bubble, but actually you should be aware of what customers are saying about you wherever they are. Definitely then automations are important, and I see that that's developing a lot. Very important to see what's happening in the future. But still, like pointing out the very no-brainer as a first customer service, pay attention here. Then moving on.
And
yeah, please.
Maybe
please.
just one point which I kind of started thinking as you were talking about customer service, that the customer service representatives especially, they kind of also embody the organizational structure in many cases when customer contacts and there is a need to refund or change things. It very often becomes rather clear for the customer whether the service rep really can do anything or whether they just need to ask from several different sources. And that is, of course, something that is totally unnecessary for the customer and should be resolved, kind of relating to whether it's seamless or omnichannel, to how the company organizes itself in terms of the different channels and possibilities for people to really help the customer.
Very good point. Thanks, Arhi. Definitely worth something to think about. And then when moving on, when talking about the buzzword seamless experience and ease of buying, this is something that we see a lot with our customers. And in quite many cases, our customers are asking us that, how to make it easier, or what have we forgotten? And this happens especially in such situations where you have been a lot online, but you haven't been that much in physical life. So as example, you're opening your first store, or you're opening few pop-ups, or you are trying a new concept somehow. So they are a bit like unsure how to make it happen. And then, of course, we are pushing a lot about the ease of buying. Arhi, what do you think about this entire topic?
Well, digital and technology in general are traditionally great way to make things more convenient, whether it's for good or for bad. In technology in general and internet. But I would say that online, of course, is very much about convenience and effortless, no friction. But of course, these things change a bit when you have more touch points, more kind of physical aspects, and especially the kind of visibility of everything between these channels, which of course then ties to the omni-channel aspects, but is something that is very important. And I think the omni, multi, any channel and seamless aspects some of the examples, which are of course totally irrelevant for retailing, but just kind of illustrating, especially when working with kind of traditional retailers with long histories with stores, to just illustrate for them, I've used, whether it's Apple or Spotify, just how easy it is, for example, for the handoff, which is an old feature for Apple. Just you can have a phone, which is someone calling to your phone, but you can use any device to talk to the person, or you can change songs with Spotify in any device, whichever you use for listening. So this seamless kind of, not taking into account which channel you are using, but then you can easily transfer whatever you're doing to another channel, whether you're like in the stores, in department stores, they've known for decades that they have products in different stores, and if you go to one store, it used to be very easy for them to just ask, would you want to get this product which we don't have here from another store, and then in a couple of days you could try it out. But this is not as easy when you have digital and the stores, and traditionally it has been much more difficult. But on the other hand, still to the point that we have in history, for example, in 80s and 70s and 80s, there were many mail order companies like Next and Gap and others who then eventually started to work in the physical space. But the mail order business, for example, for the Williams-Sonoma in US, which is a somewhat or mid-sized home product retailer, but they have 70% of revenue coming from online, and that is very much because of their legacy with the mail orders. They've been able to start using data and really understanding the different channels.
Really strong examples. Thanks, Arhi. Pinja, what would you say about this topic?
Yeah, when again we evaluate this from Shopify point of view, I would say that there are still like low-hanging fruits. Many brands can take. Like you need to show the correct store info, and that's easy to do with only a few steps. And I would say that these fast-growing brands, for example, like Gym Plus Coffee or Wetsuck. Gym Plus Coffee is an apparel brand, and Wetsuck is a furniture company. They have taken the advantage of the tools Shopify ecosystem offers and have combined them. But in a big picture, I would say that when we evaluate the seamless experience on Shopify ecosystem, you should understand that it's kind of integrating the customer needs to serve them better over the channels. So from that point, I think that we can have kind of the bridge to the the third topic we highlight, where we go into next, that how you kind of integrate the customer needs to create a seamless experience. And the one thing I want to highlight, that I see that many still create the campaigns by channels, but it should be by customer segments.
Thank you, Pinja. I would fully agree on that. And on top of that, I'm trying to add like concrete ideas. What should you check? What are the really like low-hanging fruits? Number one that we have seen when conducting data studies with our customers is that you need to have correct information already on the product card. If you don't have on a product card information that is this item eligible for a pickup, is this available there, and so on, then it's very tough for the customer. Not that many actually ask from chat or call you, then you are already losing some of the demand. So you should be aware that you have those online touch points. There you need to make sure that it's loud and clear that what items are available, where, if only possible. And as example, we checked with Pinja, one of our customer, they had wrong office hours listed on the website. So if you're going to the store and it's closed, that's extremely unpleasant experience as a whole. And then when talking about my examples in Shopify space, I personally love Allbirds, that they take this one-on-one relationship with the customer in their point of sales, and they truly try to serve you. They are asking that, have you been shopping online? Have you been looking at the goods beforehand? And they have that personal touch. Even though the stores are not that great in terms of space, they are actually very small, but the feeling you get there is very personal, and therefore I've been shopping many times in their locations. And then probably another example from the Nordics would be our customer Singular Society and their flagship store in Stockholm, as they are offering something else. They are selling a subscription service with additional goods, sort of like trying a new way of retail. It's very important that when you are looking at the bigger purchases, more expensive purchases, you get to see the items, you get to try the items when talking about clothing. So I think, like, if someone would ask me what's the hottest Shopify or POS location in Nordics, then definitely Singular Society, strongly recommend if you are ever in Stockholm. But Arhi, anything else you would like to add here on top?
Well, in terms of the stores and using stores for companies that have kind of traditionally work basically only for online, I think that the big question, not necessarily to Shopify, but to real estate providers, whether they are shopping centers or others, it's a big challenge for the kind of retail market, the retail real estate market, to really start developing spaces which are not kind of traditional stores as we've seen for decades, but still really kind of utilize the aspect that there might be seasonal pop-up type of places, or something that has also a warehouse incorporated. Now they are basically traditionally a big store with a warehouse attached to it, and then only one big store. But how to do that much more nimbly in locations that are closer to customer, with not necessarily all products shelved for the customer. And I think there are a lot of things to happen in this space. And one great example of thinking retail space differently for, well, last 40 years has been, again, a mail order company in UK, Argos, which they have still hundreds of stores which don't have any products on shelves. All the products are stacked behind the cashiers, and customers get them once they've decided what they want to have. And that's, of course, something that is very, how to say, easy to transition to mobile and online, because customers do select everything without touching the product, and they really have models which are very convenient in terms of speed of pick up or click and collect and others. So if someone ever goes to UK, that's worth visiting.
And I would like to add that it was a good point that Arhi, what we just said, that based on studies, there are kind of study results that consumers who spend more brands channel, they will spend more. Like, if you can kind of really follow like the consumer behavior in brands different channel, you can make even better segmentation. And the second point is that, for example, this ease of buying, you should also analyze that from different age groups and how do they behave if you serve multiple age groups. Because, for example, if you have this Generation Z, we all know that they will buy more on social media platforms and so on. So the experience might be totally different than other age groups.
Very good points. And I would like to add on top a very actual example. If anyone has been following NRF in New York past few days, there was this big case of Lego from Denmark. And they say that they actually like spend the time during the pandemic to innovate in retail, to build better seamless experiences in their D2C business and their physical locations. But my question to Arhi, you would be that what's changed during the pandemic? Have you seen like any changes on the market when it comes to like ease of buying or seamless experiences? Or is, as example, Finland or other Nordics a so small market that nothing really changed? Now the stores are back open, but have you seen any like actual change, or would anyone benefit of some changes here?
Well, I'm not sure if kind of something that could be directly linked to the pandemic. I think that the pandemic in general, it was a very rapid acceleration, and then everyone thought, or not necessarily everyone, but majority, especially Shopify as a company, thought that things will continue at the same very, very accelerated pace. But what happened was that it didn't decelerate, as some discussions have maybe, especially in US, been that now stores have kind of taken over for online. But in US, online took a step on a different level and then continued the historical trajectory on the new level. So it didn't decelerate or return to any historical path, but it took a step change. And I think that there probably are some examples of companies really transforming, but many of the players, like in restaurant space, there were companies who experimented selling groceries and selling directly in different ways. But I think that majority of them have kind of returned to more normal approaches. But I think it's something, the pandemic is something that we just haven't really grasped the longer term effects of kind of the behavior change, which then kind of part of that goes back to the old habits, but still the new habits are kind of ingrained. And we will probably in 5 years' time realize that things changed quite rapidly, which happened also in China during the outbreak they had, SARS back in the day. It took 10 years before we realized these new players who, like JD.com, changed their business model totally during the SARS epidemic. But it took 10 years before we realized that, hey, this online thing for JD is really big. Alibaba was established in SARS, but it took, again, 5 to 10 years before they became significant.
Thank you. That's super interesting. Moving on, sort of like creating an omni-channel strategy. Arhi, what would you think here? What are your thoughts here, and what do you think about the entire word of omni-channel? What's your take?
Well, of course, it does have a point that omni-channel and multi-channel are different in terms of integrating these different channels, but in general, of course, whenever something is combined to a word strategy, it normally doesn't really, it's very difficult, because strategy is something that makes company unique, that has trade-offs that company doesn't do, and is kind of related to everything the company does, and not only channels. But I think it is very worthy to point out that these channels really should be kind of integrated, operate, or they should be a level above whatever the company has, the supply chain and other aspects. But still, I would say that many of the examples of omni-channel strategy are something that many good online companies have done for a long time. It's partly also just a new word for some of the old aspects. And eventually we'll have something else than omni-channel, which is rather similar to omni-channel.
Thank you. What about Pinja, your quick thoughts on this? What would you say?
I would say that many people are talking about omni-channel, but when analyzing how they have really made the strategy, have they written down what do they do and what they don't do? Especially the latter is very important. I would say that is actually one concrete way to create an omnichannel experience, a winning one. It might be in the discussions, but still, as we have here written down, that many brands have fears to try new ways to do, and that's actually missing, as Arhi referred earlier, that especially these older organizations, they might have some blockers that they cannot create kind of pop-up stores so fast, and they have the warehouses and so on. So that's my comment.
I think one aspect of omnichannel strategy is to really understand I'm not an expert on systems thinking, but on kind of high level, I like the idea of really understanding all the different aspects of your business and how they operate as a system, which does influence, different touch points, have interactions between each other. And when you invest in one, it does influence in both ways. So setting up stores does influence online, and online does influence stores. And really kind of understanding that whole system is very important, and really putting to the context why we should have stores and what is the role of the store. I think that's it does really have a crucial role if it's understood well.
And very shortly, from a theoretical point of view, you can create kind of the strategy into the 4 categories, or you can divide the touch points into 4 categories. The touch points the company and brand owns, and the touch point the partnerships, marketplaces owns, and then the touch point that customer owns. For example, when customer is paying, you as a brand, you can offer the payment methods, but the customer chooses which payment method she or he is going to use. And then the social and external touch points.
Yep. And I would touch on this from a very pragmatic point of view. The ones who know me is that I keep challenging our customers. And I'm saying that quite many are thinking that should I go physical? Should I have a pop-up? Should I have a physical store? I say that you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. But I would really much recommend you trying it out, because quite many are offering that much of thought for the idea and even investing in the whole thing, but they are not getting it out. So the best way to actually A/B test anything is to get something out. And especially with like Shopify's POS, you can do that with so low cost these days, and rent a pop-up space that you can start the A/B testing. It requires investments, it requires time. But I'm like challenging our customers here. And a great example in Nordics is Kaiko, our customer, and they did this tour with Bambi Paku, who it's actually like a Shopify POS that went around Finland last 2 summers. And they were like looking at where are the customers, what can we provide them? And that was a great success story. And back in the day, you couldn't do any of this. You couldn't get that done affordably. You couldn't make it as mobile as it was. And you couldn't gather data all across different locations. And this is now possible. So I would encourage all of our customers to at least giving it a go, trying different concepts, whether they are exhibitions, whether they are pop-ups, whether it's your first, second, third, whatever store. It's worth exploring the idea and it's worth testing it. If you never don't go that far, if you're trying to avoid all the risks, then that's somewhat of a difficult matter. Final topics of the day: experimental retail. I just mentioned our customer Kaiko as an example, but there are many others. What about Arhi? What do you think about the role of experimental retail, and what would you even define that? What is experimental retail these days?
Well, experiments in general are the best way to progress in anything. It's about doing as small as possible things. For online retailers, of course, experimenting and A/B testing is very familiar, but for offline, it's traditionally thought of being much more cumbersome and difficult to experiment anything, but it is very different kind of experimentation. And for smaller companies, I would say, of course, it doesn't necessarily feel that it's as easy as it can be, but for bigger companies, it is really difficult. So experimentation is really the edge that the small company can have over a big company. And it is, after all, it doesn't really matter on what revenue levels you are. More important is the direction you're going. So if you kind of keep progressing day in and day out, learning more, you eventually will get to the level where the big players are, who are not learning and not kind of progressing in their business. There are so many examples of companies who've just been satisfied on the level they are and have kind of stopped experimenting anyway. They have committees and they take for years to do anything, whereas a small company can much more nimbly do small things and keep on learning.
Great.
I like very much, even though I'm not a sports expert or don't like sports metaphors, but I've used very often Johan Cruyff's quote about speed. And he didn't seem to think that he's fast, but he said that people confuse insight and speed. So he started to run earlier than others because he knew where the ball was going instead of running faster than the other guy. So he started to go to some direction earlier. And I think experimentation is very much about that, knowing where to go, and then with small steps, kind of defining where you need to get. And then, of course, with experimentation, you can always, course correct. You don't take too big steps to the wrong direction.
It's easy to agree on that. Thanks, Arhi. Pinja, what do you say here about experimental retail in Shopify space?
I highlight co-creating the experiences with the customers is the key. And for example, as a starting point, you can use this post-purchase service to collect feedback, how we can improve. Some apps like Sesame, this booking app in Shopify ecosystem, or video online shopping tools I mentioned, Pump, User Hero, these are bringing kind of this physical experience to the digital world. But then I would say that the unboxing is also one of the key points of how you can create the experimental retail and how you can offer that and in all channels you are like it doesn't differ. So that's one question to think about.
Thank you, Pinja. And my point here would be that quite many of our customers have been asking that now I'm going to events. Events are back, hooray! But should I make money there? my sort of like answer is that yes, that events where you meet tons of folk, tons of people, that's definitely a room to have that discussion. The brand should be there, and that you're selling goods. Great example is the Finnish Football Association. When they are having the national games, they are always present there with their stands and selling their items, jerseys, and all of that stuff. And that has been actually a really good source for them to collect that feedback directly from end consumers, that you are where the customers are, and where the customers are in mass. Then you can also do really good sales, but also collect feedback and understand what the customers are looking for and so on. So really good example in that sense. Moving on to our final topic of the day, and that would be Metaverse. So this is something that people keep talking about a lot, but that this is, again, a topic that we haven't seen that much. I would give Pinja your room first to introduce this. What have you seen in our customers?
Yeah, so many luxury brand and all these top 100 world brands, they have some initiative around on Metaverse, and you can find lists of these companies just like by Googling. But I would bet more that the actually Metaverse, I would replace that with word digital services, and how or digital experiences, as we just talked, like a few of these brands during the COVID, like we see that, okay, people need to spend time at home. So these two brands like Temple or Peloton, they are a great example of the home gyms and how they have created and connected the digital services to the products itself. So I would bet my money on that more, like create digital services, and then this metaverse is coming maybe later to really be like a profit machine.
Good. What about Arhi? What's your thought on metaverse and related?
Well, firstly, I have to admit that I'm not the best person to really. I don't have enough understanding on really saying anything specific about metaverse, but at least for me, it's a great example of something that really has a lot of hype around it. It would be very easy to say that it's just hype, and it would be very foolish to overlook whatever metaverse is and will be. So kind of tying back to the experimental aspects, it would be something that companies should look into and experiment with. It's not necessarily expecting too much short-term profits or anything, but to really understand who is there, what happens there, what are the possibilities. But I do think that it is something that will incrementally kind of evolve into something different. Like we've seen these examples from Walmart, where you have some kind of goggles and you go around the store, which is the traditional way how a grocery store would want people to buy, because they are used to building these shelves and aisles and big stores. So that is something akin to how the first car was developed. It was a horse carriage without a horse. And first TV programs, at least according to stories, were filmings of people recording radio. So taking an old thing to a new medium. So instead of what we have now as a car or a TV, which is totally different, it has evolved. Digital cameras had exactly the same thing. There were different kinds of companies developing. Some were printer companies, some were TV companies, and they all developed different aspects to what eventually became a digital camera, which then eventually was surpassed or replaced by a mobile phone. But anyway, it will develop into something that will probably have some commercial value. Well, any place which has people has commercial value for a retailer. So
I do actually love that comment, and I'm saying the same. I don't have a personal opinion on this, but I'm probably saying that when I've been talking to some of the enterprise level brands, that they need to be here. When you are at a certain level, certain grade, then you need to be at least curious about this. What this will mean in e-commerce, probably not. You won't see the full potential still this year, but I think overall very, very interesting stuff. And then Arhi, what did we miss? Did we miss anything? Would you add on top something or some themes that you feel are burning hot this year?
Well, of course, the big topics nowadays are inflation and inventories, or last year, and will probably keep on being hot topics this year. And certainly, especially inventory problems are something. Well, inflation has influenced many of the online players, especially in grocery setting. And I don't have any exact kind of points to help anyone with inventory problems. But of course, there are companies that really are efficient, whether it's what kind of products they sell or what kind of assortments they sell, and how that really helps to turn over the inventory. But besides the kind of short-term questions, something that I very much like, again, kind of tying back to the first comments related to Jeff Bezos, is a question which he, in one of the annual letters, he said that he too seldomly gets asked. He very often gets asked what will change in the next year or next 10 years. But he said that he would much more like to think what kind of things won't change during the next 10 years. They are the real kind of strategic building blocks. And just to maybe remind everyone that as much as things change, as much as there are new channels, new tools, new technologies, the kind of basic building blocks of a strategy, of a sustainable strategic advantage, whether you think about IKEA, Lidl, Costco, any other kind of strategically great differentiated company, they have evolved, they have changed. But looking into what are the basic building blocks of IKEA, they haven't changed that dramatically during the last decades. But then the smaller nuances, what kind of products, how they sell them, they have evolved. And I think that's something worth at least remembering.
Great. Love the analysis. Now you have the perfect possibility to ask us any questions if you wish. There is the chat window. You may address any questions. And pointing out that if you want to follow more of our content, we have Commerce Insights podcast as example on Shopify. Every Monday morning, a new episode. You can also reach us via email or call. There are the details. Thank you, Arhi, so much having you here. It has been a truly pleasureful webinar. What would be your final words? Anything you would want to tell to the listeners?
Well, maybe as kind of whether it's about like you were encouraging your customers to experiment or do something with the stores. I think especially during these times, it's very good to be prepared for whatever will happen, because as we've seen over the last years, the only certain thing is that some unexpected thing will probably happen over the next years. And those companies who have the kind of fundamentals ready, whether it's technology, systems, assortments, any other, they are traditionally the ones who get kind of survive the best. And I think the preparedness for unexpected changes is something that is really, really to remember out of all this.
Great, thank you. Pinja, do we have any questions? Anything at all?
Not so far. So I think this time we have no questions and we can maybe, it's time to wrap up.
Sure. So thank you so much, Arhi, for today. Thank you, Pinja. It's been a pleasure and wishing you a really commercially successful week. Take care. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.